carbonation, when you're trying to produce a carbonated product on, there are many homebrewers who have difficulty with this just on a home scale, I know, until you get some experience with your equipment, but when you start scaling up, it becomes incredibly challenging, and it's a complex subject, and we've spent probably more teeth gnashing and blown, packaging days and issues on packaging days with carbonation than anything else by a long shot. It's something that everybody struggles with on a large scale if you're using CO2 anywhere in your process. So there are tons of resources out there on Pro Brewer on the topic for the larger scale and the homebrew scale. I know Homebrew Talk had a lot of threads back in the days when I was active on that forum on the topic. As far as some of the other ones, I think fermentation, when you're doing low gravity means that the fermentation can get away from you a lot quicker. Because when you're fermenting to 7%, 8% potential alcohol, your yeast are going through the growth cycle very differently. You're getting different chemistry. Your pH swings are a lot higher because you don't have as much honey buffering your water. So if your water is too soft, then your pH is going to drop very quickly, and you can get into trouble there. So that's the other side. Is the fermentation is more challenging with the. Ironically, I think it's more challenging just to ferment a low gravity mead than it is a standard mead or possibly even a saccharine. So I tend not to sweat the details as much with those. I just pitch lots of yeast and keep it fed and check on it every now and then. But when you're fermenting a 7%er, you got to check in on it, a couple times a day, once a day, certainly, because 5 days it's done. So if something goes wrong, it'll go wrong very fast.
Yeah, I've had the same thing happen when I've made lower alcohol ones. I've missed feedings entirely because it just went like that. Yep. Mm-hmm. It went when I wasn't looking.
Yeah, it's hard to recover from that. Yeast hulls are about the only thing you can do at that point.
Well, it turned out in my brews I was lucky. It didn't seem to need the nutrients too much. So that's good. We have a 5-pound pack of yeast hulls we keep on the shelf in case of emergency. I call it the parachute. So that's But having I think as we've gotten bigger, we have more production guys now, so that helps. So if one of us is out sick or is busy that day, then there's somebody else to notice that something is going wrong. Or going to right.
Right.
Do you find that do you have more SO2 issues with sessions than you might with standard and sack strength?
No, we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I do. We have a tester. That's something that would be good for. Ripper tester for SO2 is something that I think is an essential tool, especially for making grape wine, because you just have no idea how much SO2 is getting bound up in your product.
Right.
So, get together with a buddy and split the cost or something would be my best suggestion. I know that our local wine guild here, that there are a couple of folks who have some, and they sort of share the cost and they all share use of it. But that's something that is the one tool I'd not want to live without. I think that is. And
are you using Hannah's product, or are you using the Vinmetrica or something completely different?
Yep. We're using the Vinmetrica.
The 300.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Joe just popped in and asked why the yeast hull's in an emergency.
The yeast hulls help you dig yourself out when you miss a nutrient addition, but it's too late to add any sort of DAP or your normal nutrient protocol. They help to pull out some of the stink and just degas it real well. Vigorous pump over. Whenever that something goes wrong with one of our batches, we'll take corrective action. But then the next thing we do is we'll do a 90-minute pump over, make sure that we drive all that hydrogen sulfide out of the solution, because it's quite volatile at that point, and you'll drive it up. But if you leave it too long, it'll bind with alcohol, and then it's possible to get it out, but it takes a heroic effort to get it out. And copper treatments and everything is something I would not want to do as a home brewer, because you don't have sterile filtration to remove the copper later on.
Right. So I'm assuming you guys have inline a can machine now, a canning machine, or are you bottling your sessions?
Everybody I know who's canning uses a mobile canner, and we're in that category.
Okay,
we're not big enough yet to justify having our own canning line.
Right.
I've only seen one in-place canning line so far of all the meaderies I've visited. Everybody else is using the mobile guys. So, was it blah blah blah. I'm drawing a blank. Baltimore. Oh God, okay. Charm City Meadworks. Thank you. Oh God, yeah. So I was thinking Queen City, and that's Charlotte. So yeah, but they've got an in-house bottling canning line, but everybody else is using the mobile lines, which are great because they're everywhere.
Yeah, it is, and the nice thing about the mobile canners is not only are they paying for the equipment and the upkeep, but they have a tremendous amount of expertise. So by sticking with them for a couple of years, even though we're eventually planning on buying our own canning line, we're learning from them every time we can. Mm-hmm. Watching things break and things go wrong, we're learning. So it's also an education. Because that's really complicated. Packaging is hard. Packaging is very hard for everyone.
Just for cans or for bottles both?
Both, really. I mean, but especially canning lines are very complex machines, and things go wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And so you guys do your carbing in bright tanks and then pump it out from there?
Mm-hmm. We just push it out of the bright tank.
Mm-hmm. How big are your bright tanks?
We have a 15-barrel and a 60-barrel.
Wow, nice. How long does it take to get the 60-barrel ready to be able to can?
It takes us about 2 days to carbonate in the 60-barrel. Yeah. And I think, talking to my brewery buddies, they swear up and down I can get that time down, but we haven't figured it out yet. I think maybe I need a bigger CO2. The stone that I have is probably not big enough to be able to do it in 24 hours. So, but there's definitely a learning curve with when you're trying to scale up, because even the 15-barrel bright tank, I can turn that around, have that carved in 12 hours and ready to go. But we've also been using it for 3 years. So we just got our 60-barrel about 3 months ago. So we're still learning the ins and outs.
Nice. Must have just missed that.
So you just carbonate. That's the one thing I've always wondered is on a large scale how carbonation is actually achieved. You just put a stone in there and then seal it up, is it, or what's the process?
Yeah. Yep. So you have a pressure vessel that is capable of holding 15 pounds of pressure, and you make sure you purge all the air out of it so that you're not forcing air into your product under pressure and oxidizing it first. And then once you get the mead in there, then you turn the gas on the stone and the carb stone. The key is to restrict the flow. So you need a flow restrictor to keep it from just rushing in too fast, because that creates a big bubbles in the stone and it won't carbonate very quickly. So you have to have a flow restrictor. And the bigger breweries have a system where the flow restrictor is automatically controlled by a computer. So the computer measures the head pressure and it will adjust the flow based on as the head pressure rises. We have to do that manually, and it's as I mentioned, that's the tricky procedure in getting the carb level of the stop right where you want it at 2 volumes and not shoot over
or end up under. It takes a lot of practice. So there are threads on Pro Brewer that talk about that process.
Yeah, because I understand just hooking up CO2 splits, picking it up and shaking it's not really practical, yeah?
Exactly. What I do at home, I just put it on 30 psi every night, and then just put it on serving pressure for a couple more days, and usually it's good to go.
Yeah, I know, and that's why it surprised me when you said that your bright tanks are set up at 15 psi.
The bright tanks are pretty. Yeah, the bright tanks are pretty typically 15 psi max. I think you can order them that go up to 30, but the standard is 15. But generally, I mean, you can carbonate at 15 psi. You can carbonate to 3 volumes or so.
Mm-hmm. So are they glycol jacketed as well? In my experience, you really have to chill it down to make it work. So you're doing glycol? Yeah, 32 degrees is the temperature that you need to carb. Right, freezing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, on a home scale where you can jack the pressure up, you can do it at 38, 40 degrees. But if at lower pressures, it has to be as close to freezing as you can get it. And those tanks have enormous jackets, and we have a pretty good sized glycol chiller, so we don't have any issues getting it down there.
Right. Yeah, I normally chill my kegs down to what would it be? Another 8 degrees less than that, and it tends not to freeze at that point, but sometimes it does.
You kind of want to be right on that threshold between where it's freezing and where it's not, because I think that's where it can absorb the most gas.
You guys y'all ought to talk to Mike Fall. He's doing some interesting stuff with his CO2. That's pretty revolutionary, and so far as I know, he's willing to share. So can't hurt to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have not been out to visit him yet, but he certainly has given plenty of good advice.
Oh, his system is amazing. I mean, he's got everything computerized, and because he was a geek before he got into making mead professionally, and he's written his own software to control everything. But aside from that, though, he was telling me about, and I only understood about half of it because I'm home, not pro. But what he's doing for his CO2 stuff is pretty revolutionary, and he's actually capturing back as much as he's using, so it's cut his cost down to almost nothing, which is great because the way I understand it, CO2 is not cheap. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the volumes that he's doing, certainly it becomes a significant cost.
I'm curious. So you're certainly have grown from when you first started, right? And so you're buying bigger tanks, and then even bigger tanks yet. How much of a change do you see when you switch from making a particular given batch, one particular product in your product line, and you're used to making it in a certain size vessel, and then you switch up to a different vessel? What kind of differences do you see in the finished product, and how long does it take before you can tweak your system to make them both the same? And then thirdly, do you find that you reproduce them all pretty closely to the same, or is there, in other words, what percentage of variance do you think you might find in one batch to the next?
Yeah, that's always the challenge, right? Is it's good to scale and get a consistent product, because that's one of our goals is to be as consistent as we can, because we're competing with craft beer and they're generally trying to be very consistent. And when you scale up to new equipment, it does change the biggest factor is your volume to surface area changes. So we particularly notice this with any sort of spices, so or herbs and spices, things like hops, cinnamon, hibiscus flowers, all the other things that we use in our process that those tend to not